They only respect you when you walk away. When you no longer explain, when you no longer plead, when you no longer wait for them to see your worth, that is when the mask drops and people finally recognize the power they dismissed. Respect is rarely given to the one who stays. It is reserved for the one who shows that leaving is always an option. Machiavelli understood this truth long before modern society tried to cover it with illusions of love, loyalty, and sentiment. He saw clearly that human beings do not admire what they can control, they admire what they fear losing. And nothing creates fear more effectively than the realization that you are willing to step away without hesitation, without apology, and without regret. Think of a ruler who clings desperately to his throne, begging his subjects for affection. Such a man may hold his crown for a moment, but he will be despised and eventually replaced. Now think of a ruler who is willing to sacrifice power, who can withdraw and leave others in uncertainty. That ruler's name will echo longer than the one who begged to remain. The same law applies to everyday life, whether in love, in friendship, or in business. Walking away is not a gesture of defeat, it is a declaration of dominance. It is the ultimate reminder that you are not chained by need, not bound by fear, not enslaved by desire. When you walk away, you force the other to measure the void you leave behind. And often, that void is far heavier than your presence ever was. People crave certainty more than they crave love. The human mind cannot rest in ambiguity. It claws for explanations, for conclusions, for endings. When you stay, you provide certainty. When you leave, you deny it. This denial becomes a weapon because it forces the other person to live inside unanswered questions, endless what-ifs, and the torment of unresolved emotions. They cannot move on, and in that paralysis, they are forced to acknowledge the weight you carried all along. Machiavelli advised rulers never to build their power on affection because affection is unstable, fleeting, and vulnerable to mood and circumstance. The crowd cheers today and boos tomorrow. The lover who swears eternal devotion can turn cold the moment comfort fades. But respect, once forced into existence by strength and distance, lingers even in absence. That is why withdrawal, rather than constant giving, is the stronger hand to play. Consider how quickly we devalue what is always available. The friend who always answers the call is taken for granted. The lover who never leaves is dismissed as ordinary. The employee who never challenges authority is overlooked. But the one who is willing to leave, the one who does not fear silence, commands a different kind of attention. They become the standard by which all others are judged, the absence that haunts every comparison. Walking away is not about cruelty, it is about clarity. It shows others the boundaries of your worth. It proves that you do not negotiate with disrespect, that you do not beg for recognition, that you are not afraid of solitude. In a world where most people are terrified of being alone, the one who embraces solitude becomes untouchable. This is the essence of Machiavellian power, to turn what others fear into your greatest weapon. Imagine a man in love who refuses to leave even as he is ignored. His presence becomes background noise, his devotion a cheap commodity. But imagine instead the man who disappears suddenly, leaving behind silence where his voice once was. The same woman who ignored him will now replay his absence in her mind, not because she suddenly loves him, but because the uncertainty unsettles her. This is not romance, it is leverage, and leverage is the true currency of power. Absence elevates, predictability cheapens. When people cannot predict you, they cannot control you. And the refusal to explain, to justify, to linger when you are no longer valued, forces them into a position they cannot escape. They are left to confront themselves, their loss, their failure to recognize your worth until it was too late. Machiavelli would say, better to be feared for your withdrawal than loved for your presence. Respect is not built on presence, it is built on scarcity. Diamonds are valued not because they are beautiful, but because they are rare. So too with human presence. Make yourself too available and you become disposable. Make yourself scarce and suddenly you are precious. The paradox is cruel but true. They only see your value when they no longer have it. In every arena of life, this law applies. The warrior who retreats strategically is remembered more than the one who dies in desperation. The leader who resigns with dignity is honored more than the one who clings pathetically to office. The lover who leads calmly and silently commands more obsession than the one who pleads for another chance. Walking away is not about abandonment. It is about positioning yourself above those who thought they could dictate your worth. Machiavelli taught that power is perception, and perception is shaped not by what you give, but by what you withhold. Walking away is the sharpest act of withholding. You are not just leaving a situation, you are leaving a wound, an absence, an unspoken question. And people will respect that far more than they respect the one who stayed too long, explained too much, or tried too hard. In truth, people do not respect kindness. They exploit it. They do not respect loyalty. They test it. They do not respect consistency. They bore of it. What they respect, what they cannot fight against, is indifference. And indifference is perfectly embodied in the act of walking away because it declares, I do not need you, I do not fear losing you. But you will feel my absence long after I am gone. Walking away is not about rejection of others. It is about affirmation of yourself. It is a declaration that your time, your energy, to be wasted on those who cannot appreciate them. And when you carry yourself with this conviction, you elevate your status beyond their reach. You stop being someone they can manipulate and instead become someone they must reckon with. So remember this law: they only respect you when you walk away. They respect your silence, your absence, your refusal to beg. They respect the coldness they thought you were incapable of. They respect the void you leave behind because it forces them to confront what they lost, and though they may never admit it, their respect will be carved not by your presence, but by your absence. Walking away is not just an act of departure. It is a calculated strike at the deepest insecurities of the human mind. People can endure rejection when it is loud, when it is explained, when it has closure. What they cannot endure is the cold, silent withdrawal that leaves no explanation and no resolution, because the mind cannot fight against what it does not understand. Machiavelli understood this when he wrote about rulers and their subjects. A prince who tries too hard to be loved will weaken his position, because the more he explains, the more he exposes his vulnerabilities. But a prince who can withdraw his favor, who can leave his court in suspense, holds everyone in check through the tension of uncertainty. People fear silence more than condemnation, and absence more than attack. This truth applies in power struggles, both public and private. In politics, the leader who suddenly removes himself from the stage becomes a figure of mystery, and mystery breeds power. In relationships, the lover who withdraws without explanation lingers far longer in memory than the one who clings. In business, the negotiator who walks away from the table commands more respect than the one who stays to argue. The act of leaving shifts control instantly. When you stay, you are reacting, explaining, adjusting to another's expectations. When you leave, you dictate the terms. You become the one setting the tempo, the one defining the narrative. And in that moment, the other person has no choice but to adapt to you, even if you are no longer present. People will call you heartless for walking away. They will say you lack compassion, that you are cold, that you are arrogant. But beneath those accusations lies a simple truth. They are angry because you refuse to play the role of servant to their comfort. They wanted you to stay so they could remain in control. By leaving, you shattered the illusion, and nothing infuriates people more than losing the control they believed they had over you. Consider the psychology of scarcity. A glass of water in the city may be overlooked, but the same glass in the desert becomes priceless. Your presence works the same way. If you flood people with it, they stop valuing it. But if you withhold it, if you remove yourself, if you vanish into silence, suddenly your presence becomes the rarest of treasures. And people always worship what they cannot easily obtain. Walking away creates a narrative in the minds of others, one that you no longer have to control. They will replay every word you ever said, searching for meaning. They will invent reasons for your silence, creating stories that may not exist. They will torture themselves with possibilities, asking if it was their fault, wondering if they could have done more. And in that storm of confusion, one thing becomes undeniable. You mattered more than they were willing to admit when you were present. The greatest mistake people make is thinking respect is won through explanation. They believe if they just say the right words, if they just clarify their intentions, if they just pour out their feelings, others will finally understand. But the opposite is true. The more you explain, the more you diminish yourself. The more you justify, the more you seem guilty. Machiavelli would remind you, power is not in proving your case, it is in refusing to prove it at all. Look at history. Julius Caesar did not beg the Senate to honor him, he forced them to fear his withdrawal of mercy. Napoleon did not plead with Europe for recognition. He marched, and when he withdrew, entire nations trembled at the silence of his next move. Even in their defeats, these men commanded more respect than their weaker rivals because they embodied the principle of detachment. They could rise, they could fall, but they were never enslaved to the approval of others. The same law applies in everyday life. A man in a relationship who fears losing his partner will bend endlessly, apologizing for things he has not done, clinging desperately to avoid abandonment. His partner, seeing this desperation, will test him further, pushing boundaries to measure how much control she has. But the man who calmly walks away, without anger and without begging, transforms the balance. His absence will haunt her far longer than his begging ever could, because it declares he values himself more than her approval. Walking away is not only about others, it is about you. It forces you to confront your own fears of loneliness, rejection, and abandonment. Most people cannot walk away because they are prisoners of their own insecurity. They fear being forgotten, replaced, ignored. But here is the paradox: by fearing these things, they guarantee them. The one who clings is always forgotten. The one who begs is always replaced. The one who stays too long is always ignored. Machiavelli would advise you to embrace the cruelty of reality rather than run from it. Walking away may hurt in the moment, but it secures respect in the long term. It may feel like a loss, but in truth, it is the foundation of independence. When you no longer fear losing others, you gain the ability to dictate the terms of every relationship. And in a world where everyone is desperate to be chosen, the one who chooses himself becomes untouchable. Think of the times in your life when you tried to hold on. Did the other person respect you more for your devotion, or did they start to see you as ordinary, predictable, and replaceable? Now think of the times when you disappeared, when you removed yourself, when you refused to explain. Did they not return? Did they not question? Did they not treat you with more care? Walking away works not because it is cruel, but because it reveals the truth. People only respect what they fear losing. Absence has always been a greater teacher than presence. Parents who discipline their children with constant lectures often fail, but the parent who withdraws approval, who leaves the child in silence, instills a far deeper sense of respect. Friends who endlessly forgive are walked over, but the friend who cuts contact in silence forces a reckoning that no argument could achieve. Lovers who smother are suffocating, but the lover who vanishes becomes a ghost that haunts. In every sphere, walking away proves the same lesson. Absence commands where presence pleads. Even in war, generals have understood the Machiavellian value of withdrawal. Retreat is not always defeat. Sometimes it is the most devastating weapon. By pulling back, armies lure enemies into traps, stretch their resources, and create illusions of victory that later collapse into ruin. So too in personal wars. When you walk away, you create the illusion that they have won. Yet in reality, you have set the stage for them to collapse under the weight of their own emptiness. There is a reason people chase those who run, but ignore those who stay. Human nature is addicted to the chase, to the pursuit of what slips away. Walking away weaponizes this instinct. It transforms you from a participant in their game into the game itself. They cannot rest until they resolve the story you refuse to finish. And that endless tension is what keeps their respect alive long after your footsteps have faded. Machiavelli would say, "Do not fear being called cruel. Cruelty, when used with purpose, preserves power." Walking away may appear ruthless, but it is the cruelty that saves you from becoming a slave to the approval of others. It is the cruelty that protects your dignity, your worth, and your independence. Better to be feared for your silence than pitied for your begging. In the end, respect is not given to the one who stays at all costs. Respect is given to the one who has the strength to leave, the one who shows that nothing, not love, not loyalty, not comfort, can chain him against his will. They may hate you for walking away, they may curse your name, they may accuse you of arrogance, but beneath it all, they will respect you, and that respect will last far longer than the false affection you would have earned by staying. So learn this. People do not respect availability, they respect scarcity. They do not respect explanation, they respect silence. They do not respect those who stay forever. They respect those who can vanish without hesitation. Walking away is not the end of the story. It is the moment the story begins in their mind, replayed endlessly, a wound that never fully closes. That is why they only respect you when you walk away. Walking away is not just absence, it is a calculated act of psychological warfare. It destabilizes the mind of the other person because it denies them what they crave most, certainty. Human beings can handle pain, anger, and even betrayal, but they cannot handle uncertainty. Uncertainty eats at them endlessly, and your silence becomes the sharpest knife. Machiavelli knew that uncertainty is more powerful than confrontation. If you fight openly, people know where they stand. They may hate you, but at least they understand you. If you explain your reasons for leaving, they may even sympathize with you. But if you walk away without a word, you leave them blind, and the human mind, when left in the dark, creates monsters far greater than reality. This is why walking away lingers. An argument fades, explanations are forgotten, but silence echoes. It forces the other to replay every memory, searching for answers that never come. They invent meanings, they blame themselves, they blame you, they question everything. And in that spiral of obsession, your absence becomes far more powerful than your presence ever was. The brilliance of this strategy lies in its cruelty. By withholding closure, you turn the other person into your prisoner. They cannot move on because they have no ending. They cannot heal because the wound is left open. They cannot forget because forgetting requires finality. You become a shadow that follows them everywhere, not because you are there, but because you are not. Machiavelli advised princes to rule not through love, but through fear. And what is fear, if not the anxiety of uncertainty? Fear thrives in silence, in the unknown, in the question that is never answered. Walking away without explanation is a form of ruling through fear. It may not inspire affection, but it secures respect, and respect lasts longer than fleeting emotions. Think of how many people you once dismissed until they disappeared. Their messages became irritating, their presence felt ordinary, their devotion felt suffocating. But when they finally vanished, when the phone stopped ringing, when their attention dried up, a strange emptiness appeared. You began to notice their silence more than you ever noticed their presence. This is the paradox of human nature. We worship what we cannot have, and we despise what is always there. Walking away also exposes truth. It reveals who really valued you and who only valued your obedience. The moment you withdraw, those who truly respected you will feel the loss deeply, but those who only wanted to control you will grow bitter, angry, resentful. Either way, you win, because their reaction reveals what was always hidden beneath the surface. This is why Machiavelli placed such importance on strategy over sentiment. Sentiment clouds judgment, while strategy clarifies reality. Walking away is not about punishing others. It is about exposing the truth of their dependence on you. It is a mirror you hold up to them, showing them what they refuse to admit, that your presence was not a gift they were entitled to, but a privilege they failed to cherish. People will often test your limits, not because they want to break you, but because they want to see if you have any. If you stay despite disrespect, they lose respect for you. But if you walk away the moment the line is crossed, they are forced to recognize your strength. Boundaries are not declared in words, they are declared in actions, and walking away is the ultimate boundary. In love, this truth is merciless. The one who loves more is always at the mercy of the one who loves less. The desperate lover gives and gives, hoping devotion will earn respect. But devotion only earns complacency. Respect comes when you can detach, when you can leave, when you can show that you are not enslaved by love. People may not say it out loud, but they respect the one who can walk away more than the one who stays and suffers. In power struggles, the same rule applies. A rival who refuses to engage is far more dangerous than one who fights openly. You can predict the attacks of an enemy who screams, but you cannot predict the enemy who watches silently. Walking away is a form of silence, and silence is the most unnerving sound in the theater of power. It keeps your opponents guessing, and in their guessing, they weaken themselves. Machiavelli taught that a ruler must learn not to be loved, but to be feared. Yet he also knew that outright cruelty breeds rebellion. The subtle cruelty of walking away, however, breeds no rebellion because there is no enemy to fight. You are not there to resist, to argue, to defend. You are simply gone, and in your absence the other destroys themselves. Walking away also changes how people tell your story. When you remain, they speak of you casually, carelessly, as if you are always available. But when you leave, they begin to mythologize you. They exaggerate your worth, they inflate your presence, they turn your memory into something larger than life. You become not a person, but an idea, and ideas are far harder to kill than people. Absence is how legends are born. The artist who dies young becomes immortal. The leader who vanishes at his peak becomes unforgettable. The lover who disappears without explanation becomes an obsession. Walking away creates a vacuum, and vacuums are always filled with imagination. People will build stories around your absence, and those stories will often elevate you higher than your actual presence ever could. This is why the strongest men and women in history never begged to stay. They knew the secret. Respect is in scarcity, not abundance. Cleopatra maintained her power not through constant presence, but through selective withdrawal, making her return feel like a divine event. Machiavelli himself withdrew from public life after being cast aside, and yet his words grew more powerful in absence than they ever had in presence. Time and silence did more for his reputation than speeches ever could. Walking away also preserves your dignity. Most people, in their desperation to be understood, humiliate themselves. They argue endlessly. They explain themselves to those who do not listen. They beg for recognition that never comes. But the one who walks away avoids this degradation. He does not fight for scraps of respect. He takes it by force through silence. And in that silence, his dignity remains intact, untarnished, untouchable. Do not mistake this for weakness. Weakness is when walking away is not only a tactic, it is an identity. It is the mark of someone who refuses to be bound by chains of approval, someone who does not live for the acceptance of others, someone who knows that power lies in absence as much as presence. To master this art is to master the human condition, because human beings will never stop craving what they cannot hold. Machiavelli understood that respect is rarely given freely. It is extracted through strength, and strength often takes the form of detachment. A ruler who clings to his throne invites rebellion, but a ruler who can step away at will becomes immortalized. His withdrawal is remembered, his absence mythologized, his silence feared more than his commands ever were. The same is true in your own life. The people around you do not respect what is constant. They respect what they fear losing. They do not respect what explains itself. They respect what refuses to be explained. They do not respect those who beg for attention. They respect those who can walk away in silence. It may seem cruel, but it is the cruelty that ensures your survival in a world where weakness is preyed upon. Consider how quickly people return when you withdraw. When you stop texting, when you stop showing up, when you stop offering your presence freely, suddenly the same people who ignored you begin to notice the void. They call it love, they call it realization, but it is not love, it is the shock of scarcity. Scarcity is the foundation of value, and absence is the purest form of scarcity. Walking away also forces you into mastery of yourself. It teaches you discipline over your emotions, because the impulse to explain, to beg, to cling is always strongest at the edge of departure. Resisting that impulse requires strength greater than shouting or fighting. Silence requires restraint. Detachment requires control. And control, above all, is the essence of Machiavellian power. The beauty of this strategy is its timelessness. It worked in ancient courts, it worked in Renaissance politics, and it works in modern relationships. A king who withdraws is feared, a lover who disappears is remembered, a leader who steps back is honored. The stage may change, the costumes may differ, but the law remains. They only respect you when you walk away. Walking away is not rejection, it is transformation. It transforms you from a participant into a symbol. While you are present, you are human, with flaws, with mistakes, with weaknesses. When you are absent, you are myth, reconstructed in memory, exaggerated in imagination, elevated beyond reality. People stop seeing you as you were and begin to see you as their minds create you, and often the myth is far more powerful than the truth. This is why the greatest figures in history often become larger in absence than in presence. The artist who dies young becomes immortal. The leader who falls but does not beg becomes legendary. The thinker who is cast aside but does not explain becomes eternal in his influence. Machiavelli himself proved this. Exiled, stripped of position, abandoned by those he served, he walked away into obscurity. Yet it was in that silence he wrote The Prince, a book that outlived kings, popes, and empires. His absence became his weapon, and his silence turned into his voice. Walking away also teaches others a lesson they cannot forget. By refusing to beg for respect, you force them to measure the weight of your absence. By refusing to explain, you force them to face the consequences of taking you for granted. By refusing to stay, you force them to confront the fragility of their own position. They may never admit it, but they will never forget it. Do not mistake this as a universal rule of kindness. It is not. Walking away is ruthless by design. It is not about making others comfortable. It is about making them uncomfortable. It is not about healing relationships. It is about teaching lessons. It is not about compromise. It is about conquest. To walk away is to declare that you will not live as anyone's servant, that your presence cannot be demanded, that your worth will not be negotiated.